Salvete omnes. This is Caesaris Commentarii de Bello Gallico Liber Primus, chapter 27. And Caesar writes, Helvetii omnium rerum inopia adducti, legatos de deditione ad eum miserunt. So the Helveti, nominative plural masculine, Helvetians, subject, they did the thing. Omnium is the genitive plural of any gender. Omnis, omne, all, every, of everyone, everyone's, apostrophe s. Rerum, genitive plural of res, rei, feminine, stuff. Okay, of all the stuff. Omnium, the adjective modifying the noun rerum. Inopia, from inopia, I, feminine. First declension noun, it is the opposite of copia. If copia is like copious, an abundance of wealth, of resources, inopia is the lack of it. The incopia, the non-copia. So a lack of omnium rerum, a lack of everything. Adducti, from adduco, adducere, adduxi, adductus, to duco ad, to lead towards. Can also mean to influence. If you influence someone, you lead them towards doing something. Or if you are influenced, you are led into doing something. So the adducti agrees with the Helveti. Adducti being nominative plural masculine perfect passive participle, agreeing with the nominative plural masculine subject Helveti. De adducti. As a perfect passive participle, it is the fourth principal part of the verb. That means it's perfect, because it's perfect tense. It shows an action which was prior to that of the main verb, happened before the main verb. So first, the Helvetians were influenced. Having been influenced by what? By an inopia. You could say it's an ablative of means or of cause, probably more of an ablative of cause. What were they influenced by? Or actually by means of. Influenced by means of a lack of all things, or influenced because of an inopia, of a lack, omnium rerum, of everything. This forms a nice participial clause right here. Adducti, having been influenced by a lack of all things. And the placement of the participle kind of acts like English punctuation, kind of acts like a comma. You know, commas help you read. They help tell you which words go with what, where the pause happens, where the sense begins and ends. Latin word order kind of does the same thing. So see the Helvetians, Helveti, and they are, okay, something about all the stuff and a lack of all the stuff, ablative, adducti, Helvetians. So having been influenced, okay, by a lack of all the stuff. Legatos, now we're going to start the main clause. So first, they're influenced. They're influenced because they don't have any stuff. Legatos, legatos e masculine, ambassadors, accusative plural masculine, direct object of the main verb, miserunt. De takes the ablative, means about, concerning, or down from. Here it means about, like de bello Gallico, about, concerning the Gallic War. De deditione. We have deditio, deditionis feminine. It comes from a form of do dare, to do dare de, to give down from. De do, de dare. Dedo, dedere, dediti, deditus is the verb, to surrender. The noun is a deditio, fourth principal part. Take the supine stem, dedit, add the eo, eonis feminine to make it a noun. There you go. A handing over, a surrendering. Concerning surrender. Ad, preposition to or towards, or near, takes the accusative motion towards, eum. Is ea id, this thing, that thing, it's the non-specific location demonstrative. Here it just refers to some dude we've already mentioned before who's singular and masculine. That would be your boy, Caesar. Stands for Caesarem, the accusative. Ad Caesarem. So to him. Him being Caesar. And then miserunt. Miserunt is third person plural, perfect active indicative of mitto, mittare, missi, missus. Miserunt, third person plural, perfect active indicative. Who sent? They sent. The subject, Helvetians, they did. They sent, they have sent. Whom did they send? The direct object, the ambassadors. Oh, towards Caesar. They sent to Caesar ambassadors concerning surrender. They're going to surrender to Caesar. Qui cum eum in itinere convenissent, seque ad pedes projecissent, suppliciter que locuti flentes pacem petissent, atque eos in eo loco quo tum essent, suum adventum expectare iusisset, paruerunt. Great sentence. Check this guy out. So, qui cum eum cum. You're going to start here, right here. Cum goes right there. When, since, although. Nary an ablative in sight apart from the itinerary, but that's going to go with the preposition in. So this is cum conjunction when, since, although. Could be temporal with when, could be causal sense, could be concessive clause, and that is although. We could also say an adversative clause. What's the qui doing here? The qui is the relative, qui, qui, quod, but here it's acting where English wants a demonstrative. So English wants to say, cum, when, qui, these guys had convenissent, had convenio, convenire, conveni, conventus, they had convened, eum, him, direct object, ifs, ea, id. So who are these guys or those guys? English wants a demonstrative here. Latin wants, or not once, but kind of, prefers to have a relative. Because the relative will relate back to an antecedent, even if the antecedent is in the previous sentence. So the qui is referring to the legatus. Nominative plural masculine because it's the subject of this verb, which is plural. And legatus, plural masculine. Now remember the antecedent, the noun that the pronoun takes the place of, they have to agree in gender and number. They don't have to agree necessarily in case. Legatus is accusative in the previous sentence. Qui here is nominative. You should translate as cum, qui, when these guys, who, which guys? The legatos. Oh. It's kind of awkward in English to use the relative. When which guys had convened with him on his journey, on his route, on his march. This is kind of a Latin idiom, eum convenire. It means to have an interview with. To have an interview with an accusative. To convene someone together to talk with them. Convenio, convenire, to come together. So when, since, although, probably cum temporal. When the legati, these guys, when which guys, the legati, had convened, they had gathered with him, they had come before him on his march. So Caesar's marching, they met up with him on his march. So when these guys had met up with him on his march, and the pluperfect subjunctive, it's subjunctive because we're in the cum clause, and it's pluperfect because it's showing a prior action to the main verb, which is the main part of the sentence, the very last word. So this action is prior to the main verb, paruerunt. So they had convened. Seque, and they say, ad pedes projecissent. Say is the accusative plural masculine direct object. You can always circle the reflexive and draw an arrow to the subject, projecissent. If the subject is projecissent, it's they. It's the same legati. They had projecissent, pro, iaccio, iaccio, iacere, ieci, iactos. So it's to iaccio, throw pro in front, to throw pro forward. So they had thrown what? Say, themselves, ad pedes. Ad takes the accusative motion towards to his pedis masculine, to his feet. Caesar's feet. I bet he hated that. And que, and it shows a close connection to the previous. So x, y, que. It's almost like there isn't really a conjunction there at all. It's post-positive. It's almost like it's an afterthought. So when these guys had met with him while he was marching, and then almost immediately following, they had thrown themselves at his feet. Suppliciterque, and then immediately following suppliciter, there's supplex, supplicus, and then we have suppliciter as an adverbial form. So suppliantly, like a suppliant, like beggars, because they're begging him. They're at his feet. They're begging him, beseeching him. Locuti, the perfect passive participle, but be careful because if you look this one up, it's loquor, loqui, locutus sum. Deponent verb. Oh no, you're fine. Looks passive, translate as active. So instead of saying having been spoken, it's having spoken. Loquor, loqui, locutus sum, like loquacious or eloquent. Speak. It's different from dico in that dico is like to speak, to say, to affirm something that is true, or from a place of knowing, from a place of understanding, a place of authority. That's dico. You're affirming, or you're a known dico, which equals nego, negare, negavi, negatus, to negate or deny. Whereas loquor is like to chatter. So having, you can just say to speak. And having spoken, blubbered like beggars. Flentes, they are fleoflere, they are weeping. Fleoflentes. And it's a present active participle. So it's the present stem fle, and then ens, entis, and then declines like a third declension. Ens, entis, enti, entim, ente, entes. Here we go. So it's nominative plural masculine. Could be accusative plural masculine, but pacem is the direct object of petiscent. Flentes agrees with the subject, as does Loki. Locuti. Ha, funny, not Loki. Oh, sneaky Loki. Locuti, which agrees with qui, the subject. So they met with Caesar, then they threw themselves at his feet, and then they spoke like beggars, like suppliants, beseeching him, beseechingly. Flentes, and while they were doing that locuti, that talking, that chattering, that blubbering, they were weeping. They were turning on the waterworks. This is a present active participle, and present participles happen contemporaneously to the verb, happen at the same time. So when they were petiscent, first they locuti, then they petiscent, and while they were petiscent, they were flentes. They petiscent the pacem, they sought peace. They sued for peace. And notice that this is a syncopated form, petiscent, for petiviscent. Notice the we syllable has been dropped, the vi. Syncopated, a shortened form. This is the third person plural pluperfect active indicative, petiscent for petiviscent. And it's pluperfect active subjunctive like proiacescent and conveniscent. So, and having spoken like beggars, they sued for peace while weeping. You could say they sued for peace through tears. Atque, and also even, let's not forget what else happened. They did those three things, and then we have a switch of subject. That'll become apparent pretty soon. We have eos, the accusative plural masculine of is, ea, id. So those guys, them, because it's the accusative direct object, they would be the subject. They are doing something, but I see the direct object, them, and also them in eo loco, in plus the ablative, is, ea, id, ablative, loco from locus e masculine, ablative, in location, which place? In that place. Well, which place is it? Answered by quo. You don't always find a demonstrative answered with a relative pronoun, but you often do. Is, qui, issea id is answered by qui, qui, quod, because the demonstrative issea id is kind of vague. Which place is it? Because you're saying, well, we go to that place. The next question is, okay, which place is that? Okay, it's the place which, and then you give more information. You give an adjectival clause to describe which place it is. A relative clause introduced by a relative pronoun. Quo. In which place, in that place, in which place tum essent. They essent sum esse fui futurus, third person plural, imperfect active subjunctive, in which they were tum, adverb at that time, then. So Caesar told the ambassadors, you go back and tell them to stay put. Where? In eo loco, in that place. Which place, Caesar? Quo tum essent, in which they essent, imperfect subjunctive. So notice how we switch tenses. Why have we switched tenses? Because they currently are in that place. And the imperfect subjunctive is used for contemporaneous actions with the main verb. So when they paruerunt, they were currently in that place. But the pluperfect subjunctive had already met with Caesar, thrown themselves at his feet, and sued for peace. And then he, iusisset, eubeo, eubere, iusi, iusus, Caesar, had ordered them to expectare, to await for his accusative direct object, suum adventum, his own arrival. In that place where, in which, tum essent, they essent currently were. All of these pluperfect subjunctives are built off of this cum clause, and it's a cum temporal, when. You could even translate it as after. After they had convened with him on his march, and they had thrown themselves at his feet, and having spoken as suppliants, sued for peace through tears. And he had bid them to await his arrival in that place where they currently were. After all that, paruerunt, they obeyed. Pareo, parere, parui, to obey. Optime. That's the main clause at the end. It's just one word. Third person plural, they. Now, another reason why the qui is outside is that the qui is not only the subject of this verb inside the cum clause, and this verb too, and this verb too, it also is the subject of the verb in the main clause. Qui paruerunt is really the main clause. Then the cum clause is everything else that builds up to the paruerunt. And once again, shows the chronological order of events. First they met up with him, then they threw themselves at his feet, and then they spoke, and then as they're speaking, they're crying, please let me out of peace. And he said, okay, fine, in that place in which you are, I want you to await my arrival. And then they obeyed. Eo postquam Caesar pervenit, obsides, arma, servos, qui ad eos perfugiscent, paposcit. Eo, to that place, thither. Which place? The one we just mentioned. Oh, okay. This is an adverbial form. To that place, thither. Postquam, it's post and quam, after that, or afterwards. Afterwards, Caesar pervenit. Caesar, subject, pervenit, from pervenio, pervenire, perveni, perventus. So third person singular, perfect, active, indicative. After Caesar arrived, pervenio usually takes ad or in plus the accusative motion towards, but it is also allowed to take this adverb eo, thither. After Caesar had arrived thither. After Caesar arrived thither. Notice postquam takes the perfect tense here, even though the pluperfect would be more correct. Obsides, arma, servos, qui ad eos perfugiscent. So the obsides, what are the obsides? Well, those are the obsides, masculine hostages. Nominative or accusative, could be either. Probably going to be the accusative direct object. arma from arma, orum, always neuter, always plural. So, could also be the nominative or the accusative plural, either the subject or the direct object. Oh my goodness, the suspense is killing me. Servos, from servos e masculine. We have slaves, os ending, so it must be, that's right, accusative, plural, and masculine. Well, it doesn't mean necessarily that obsides and arma must also be accusative, plural, masculine, but it does sort of work in that favor. All three of these being accusative, plural, masculine. Qui, relative pronoun. Relative pronouns must agree with their antecedent in gender, number, not necessarily in case. So if the antecedents being the servos, accusative, plural, masculine, this must be plural, masculine, and it's nominative. Qui is nominative. Is the subject of perfugiscent. So in the slaves, which ones? Who ad eos perfugiscent, to them, meaning the Helvetians, perfugiscent. Caesar wants the any slaves that have perfugiscent fled. Third person plural, pluperfect, active, indicative, subjunctive. My bad, a perfugio, who had fled to them. So paposcit, that comes from posco, poscere, paposki, has no supine. Third person singular perfect tense. It's got that perfect reduplication. Paposcit. He demanded. So after Caesar arrived thither, he paposcit. He demanded direct object obsides, arma, servos. Like he's going through a drive-through. Give me some hostages. I'll take some weapons. The side of slaves. Which ones? The ones who had fled to them. Dum ea conquiruntur et conferuntur, nocte intermissa circiter hominum milia sex, eos pagi, qui verbiganus appellator, sive timore perterriti, ne armis traditi supplicio adficarentur, sive spe salutis inducti, quod in tanta multitudine dediciorum suam fugam aut occultari aut omnino ignorari posse existimarent, prima nocte e castris helvetiorum egressi ad renum finesque Germanorum contenderunt. That's right. It goes from here to there. You've never been so happy in your whole life. Dum while. Meanwhile, in the meantime, back at the ranch, dum, well, introduces a temporal clause which usually weirdly takes the present tense. So while things are currently happening at the time of the main verb. So while, ea refers to stuff before. And do I want it to be qui? I guess. Qui dum? It's kind of weird. Maybe it would work. But ea refers to all that stuff before. The obsides, the arma, and the servos, qui ad eos perfugiscent. Ea refers to the ea. Conquiruntur. So conquire, the root is quiro, as in to quiro, to ask after, to look for, to seek out for. It's the root of the word quest, or question. You're asking after something. So conquiro means to not just quiro, to look for it, but to really look for it. We're really looking after that thing. So conquiruntur, third person plural, present, passive, indicative. And the subject is the ea. While these things are being conquiruntur, they're being looked after, or they're being sought after. So they're taking time to look for the obsides, the arma, and the servos, the ones who had fled. dum ea conquiruntur. So, while these things are being sought for, looked for, et conferuntur, and after they're being looked for and found, they are conferuntur. Confero, conferre, contuli collatus. They're being cum fero, brought together. They're being gathered, compiled, collated even. Collatus, collate, to put together into a pile. So while these things are being sought after and compiled, brought together into a pile, nocte intermissa, cerciter hominum milia sex. So nocte intermissa is an ablative absolute, with night having intervened, meaning a night passed. You can translate it that way. So while these things are being sought after and compiled, a night passed, in which cerciter, the adverb form of cercum, so roundly, circly, or you can say the English approximately hominum milia sex. 6 milia, thousands, hominum, genitive, partitive genitive, plural of homo, hominis, masculine, of humans. 6,000 of humans. 6,000 people. 6,000 persons. So in the meantime, while, present tense, while these things are being looked for, while these things are being gathered, a night passed, and then around 6,000 people, new subject, eos pagi, eos, the genitive of is ea id, and it agrees with pagi, from pagosi masculine, a canton. Remember that the whole state of Helvetia, omnis civitas Helvetia, divisa est quatuor, it's divided into 4 of these pagi, these cantons. And Caesar nearly eradicated the Tigerine, the Tigerinus pagos. Well, this one, qui verbigenus appellator. This one, qui, which, the verbigenus appellator. It is third person singular, present passive, indicative of appellalo, appellare, appellavi, appellatus, is called or named the verbigenus, the verbigen. So these guys, 6,000 people. Remember, the subject is the sex milia. The hominum is just describing who the sex milia are, of people. It could be 6,000 of cows, 6,000 of whatever. Hominum is the genitive, partitive. That's the subject. And of this pagus, of that pagus, which one? Notice that the qui, the relative, answers the is ea id, the eos. Which pagus is it? It's the one qui, which is called the verbigenus. Okay, so 6,000 persons of the pagus, which is called the verbigenus. Sive timore perterriti. Sive is like sau, S-E-U, and it's if. It's si and then way. And you know way from well, form of wolo. And it's whether, if, or if. The C-way is met with a correlative which correlates another C-way. Whether, if, blah, 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 or if, blah, 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 Caesar is supposing. He's sort of like, well, it was either due to this, or perhaps it was either due to this that these people did this absolutely foolish thing that they're about to do. I don't know, but it looks like we're going to have to kill a whole bunch of Gauls, says Caesar. C-way, whether if, there's the C, timori perterriti. We've seen timori perterritus before. Considius got timori perterritus. He was terrified by a fear. Terrified, perfect passive participle, or you could just say it's an adjective. And then timore, the ablative of cause, of timor, timoris masculine. You could just translate timori perterritus as panicked. But who panicked at this point? It's the sex milia. The sex milia perterriti. So whether if they panicked, and then ne armis traditis supplicio adficerentur, so that they panicked, so that for the purpose of ne, and that's the negative of ut, lest armis traditis, arma, aurum, always neuter, always plural, ablative, to agree with the traditis, trado, tradere, tradidi, traditus. It's trans do, to give across, hand across, or surrender. So that ablative absolute, with their arms having been handed over, surrendered. With arms surrendered. After they had surrendered their arms. Supplicio, supplicium, supplici neuter. Looks like supplication here. It usually means punishment. Sometimes it refers to the supplicium maximum, usually refers to the death penalty, the greatest punishment, the biggest punishment. Here it can mean like consequences. And it goes with adficerentur. It's dative to go with adficerentur. They would be adficio, ad plus facio, facere, feci, factus, to get adficio, afficere, affeci, affectus. To be affected, or to afflict. Here it means to be afflicted by a supplicio, to be afflicted by a punishment. So that with their arms having been handed over, they would be afflicted by a punishment. So supplicate could also be an ablative. They would be, they would have to endure punishment. They would have to pay the penalty. They would be applied to punishment. Third person plural, imperfect, passive, subjunctive, with this negative purpose clause, negative adverbial purpose clause. They panicked. Why did they panic? So that they would not be put to punishment. They would not be made towards punishment because their arms had been handed over. After their arms had been handed over, they can no longer defend themselves. So, oh no, we are at the complete mercy of Caesar. And thus, with no arms to defend themselves, no way to defend themselves against anything Caesar wants to do to them, they peteriti timore, they panicked. It was either that, because of that, sive, or it was because inducti spe salutis. Spe, the ablative of spe, spei feminine, hope. Salutis, salus salutis, feminine, health, well-being. And then inducti, nominative plural masculine, perfect passive participle of induco, inducere, induxi, inductus. It's like ad duco we had up here. Inducti. So it refers once again to the sex melia. They either panicked, and that they panicked so that they would not be made to suffer punishment because their arms had been handed over, or if inducti, they were having been influenced by a spe salutis, influenced by a hope of well-being, a hope of safety. You could even say salvation. Turn that U into a V. Salvation. Salve. Well-being. Hope. Hope you're well. Quod. In tanta, so this is quod, which, or it could be because. In plus the ablative shows location. Tantus aum equals tam magnus. So big, so great. Ablative singular feminine to modify the ablative singular feminine. Multitudo, multitudinous feminine. You can see the root is multus aum. It's the noun form of the adjective multus. So a great number, a crowd, a multitude. There's a multitude out there. Multitudine, ablative singular feminine. In tanta multitudine, in so great. Tam magna multitudine, in so great a number. In such a great number. Dediciorum. You might remember this from the noun deditio. This is the noun form for someone who has been surrendered. The surrendered. People who have surrendered. Dediticius aum. So from that adjective, a surrendered thing, you get the noun, the substantive form dediticius. E masculine. Deditikia, I feminine, etc. for a female surrendered person. And it's going to be masculine because Latin's a sexist language. Genitive, plural. In so great a number of the surrendered, of those who had already surrendered. Suam fugam, suus you take the su part, draw an arrow to the subject. Whoop! I know you did that up here with suum adventum. I didn't even need to tell you. You did it already on your own. You drew that circle around suum and that arrow to Eucyset, the subject, Caesar. Whose arrival was it? It was Caesar's. It was his own. And the agrees with adventum, accusative singular masculine. And then down here with suam fugam, you of course circle the su part and you draw an arrow to the right there, the existimorant, the subject, which is also referring back to the milia sex. And then the agrees with the fugam, accusative singular feminine. Whose flight is it? It's their own. If the sex milia is referring to masculine, it seems weird that the agrees with that the looks feminine. Students tell me. The only reason the looks has the and it looks feminine is because it's agreeing with fugam. It's the su part that makes it agree with the subject. That's what makes it reflexive. The part just makes it agree with a noun. Out, and its correlative is out. It correlates either this or this. Either occultare, occulto, occultare, to hide, like the occult. Occultare is the present passive infinitive, to be hidden. Out, or omnino is the adverb form of omnis. So if omnis is the adjective all every, omnino is altogether, wholly, entirely. Altogether, ignorari. So occultari, present passive infinitive, ignorari, present passive infinitive, to ignoro, ignorare, to be ignored, to not be noticed, to be entirely hidden, or to be hidden or entirely ignored, not noticed. Posse, present active infinitive of possum, posse, potui, to be able to. And that explains the infinitives occultare and ignorare, because possum screams out for complementary infinitives like occultare and ignorare. To be able to either be hidden or to be entirely, wholly overlooked, ignored. And existimare, that's what they thought. Existimare, third person plural. Imperfect, active, subjunctive. Existimo, existimare, existimave, existimantus. All right, existimo, it's a verb of thinking. It's from ex-istimo, to istimo, estimate or value out. To work it out, to value it after you work out the calculations. So you guesstimate. So hominum sex milia. So imagine these 6,000 people of the canton, which is called the verbigen. So all this stuff that Caesar arrives and he says, give me your hostages, your weapons, your slaves, that stuff's being looked out for and it's being compiled, it's being gathered, it's being tallied up. Night passes and these 6,000 people of the verbigen canton, they either were already terrified, they panicked, and so that they would not suffer punishment with their arms having been handed over, after handing over their arms, that they might not suffer punishment. Or if, influenced by a hope of safety, of salvation, because, and now he's going to explain their actions, it was either they did this, either because in Taunton, so great a number of the surrendered, they existimarent, they thought, they guessed, they guesstimated, they reckoned. In so great a number of the surrendered that their suam fugam, that their escape, trying to make a break for it, aut occultari aut omnino ignorare posse, that their escape might be able, posse, to be either hidden or entirely overlooked, that no one would even know that they're gone. That it wouldn't just be that they would make a break for it without being noticed, but that ignorati, entirely overlooked, like no one would even notice that 6,000 of them were gone. All right, either seaway. Prima nocte, early in the night, ablative of time when, e castris helvetiorum, ex, ablative of separation, out of, the castris, ablative separation, castra orum, always neuter, always plural camp, out of the camp. Whose camp? Helvetiorum, genitive plural masculine, the Helvetians, of the Helvetians' camp. Early in the night, out of the camp of the Helvetians, out of the Helvetians' camp. Egressi, nominative plural masculine, egredior, egredi, egressus sum, to egradior, to step ex out of. And you can see the preposition ex there. Where did they step out of? Where did they egress, go out of the camp of the Helvetians? And because it's a perfect passive participle, though please translate actively because it's a deponent verb, egredior, egredi, egressus sum, please translate actively. Having egressed, having left from the camp of the Helvetians, having gone out of the camp of the Helvetians, prima nocte, early in the night, they then ad renum finesque Germanorum contenderat, the main verb being contendere. Third person plural, perfect active indicative. They contenderat, they hastened, they strove. So they hastened ad Rhenum, to the Rhenum, the Rhine River, finesque Germanorum, and also to the fines, that's the plural of finis, finis masculine, which is a border. In the plural, we have fines, finium, masculine, plural, and that's going to be territory. And of course, it's the territory of the Germanorum, of the germs of the Germans, because the Germans live trans Rhenum, across the Rhine. All right. All together, because this is the main clause right here. It's also the last action. They hastened to the Rhine and the territory of the Germans. They had already left from the camp of the Helvetians early in the night. And why'd they do that? Well, they did so, well, first off, while all this stuff was being looked out for and gathered. Night had already passed beforehand. 6,000 of them from the Verbigen. Okay. So, whether they panicked, that they might be put to punishment when their arms had been handed over, or be it that they were influenced by a hope of salvation, they, existimarent, thought that in so great a multitude of the surrendered, their flight might be able to be either hidden or entirely overlooked. And so, early in the night, having left from the camp of the Helvetians, they hastened to the Rhine and the territory of the Germans, or you could say it, the borders of the Germans. Optime, very well done.